I'm on my way to interview an owner of an interesting car. I'm just on my way to have a bit of a chat with Paul about his Datsun Stanza rally car. Now, he lives about an hour up the road, so I'll see you then. No, I'm not performing any U-turns. I'm here talking to Paul about this wonderful yellow Datsun Stanza. Now, before we talk about the Stanza, let me ask you, what made you go, I want to go rallying?
I knew you were going to ask this question, Jim, and I'll tell you what happened was, I was working in a mobile at Merriweather, and we were working on Murray Finlay's V6 Capri. We're preparing it for rallies, and Ted Hayes, the mechanic there, asked me to come along to an event, and it was down south somewhere, I can't remember where, but it was a horrible wet night and we had to work on the Capri. And if anyone knows about a V6 Capri, they've got this remote linkage underneath which Murray had managed to rock in something, and I had to scramble onto the car, and I got soaking wet and it was muddy, and I had to end up sleeping in the back of the short wheelbase Land Rover. It was very uncomfortable, it was cold, and I thought at that stage, why would anyone want to do this as a sport? You know, this is crazy stuff. And then I got a licence and I got a car, I got a 240 Cortina, and became, you know, like a young bloke, and had a bit of a slide around on some gravel roads and on wet tar roads, and thought, how hard could it be? And then that's where it started.
Yeah.
You know, and I really then fell in love with it. It was the adventure of it, going places you hadn't been before, and so on.
Yeah.
Really did, and that's what was my intro into it. And I had that Cortina for a few years. I ran at a few events, and yeah.
So what was, okay, Cortina was a road car that you did things with, but what was your first actual motorsport car?
Well, that was the Cortina. I threw it had all the cage in it. Was the full kit, you know. Back in when we couldn't afford shock absorbers, it was pull the front struts apart and buy a seal kit from Closters for the old Cortina, and run. I think we ran 90 grade
oil
and winds.
Yeah.
And it was very hard in the front.
Did they last the event without blowing the seals?
Yeah. Well, they got through.
But
then I discovered inserts, and then you know, it was I think it was the old Munro GTs. I think maybe back then.
Right. Now, from the Cortina, how was the progression go? What other cars?
Well, I've had a lot of cars.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I've had quite a few cars. I owned then. Well, I can't remember exactly what came after. Yes, I can. It was Jim Sullivan's old twin cam, which was a full rally car. It was owned by then Gary Wade, and I bought it off Gary. And unfortunately, I owned it for 2 weeks and parked it upside down very badly, riding it off on the infamous Gun Club Road.
Right.
And then short time after that, I pulled the motor and gearbox out of that and put it into a 68 or 69 model 2-door Cortina, the next model out, and made it a Lotus Cortina.
Yeah.
And again, started preparing that, but never really went ahead with that with rallying. Then I bought Murray Finlay's Capri.
All right.
No, sorry, not his Capri, his twin cam.
Right.
Off him, and ran that in a few events. And then LA Lancer, TA22 Celica, EH Ute, I ran at a couple of events, and then Datsun 1600s.
So of the cars you've owned, do you look back and go, I wish I still owned any of them?
Probably one of the twin cams. I think Murray's twin cam, I think would have been a good car to maintain, just because what it was.
Yeah.
But I've got a real soft spot for Datsun 1600s.
Right.
They're a tremendous car.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of success with that.
Yeah.
With that model. Yeah. I had a couple of those.
So what led you to the Stanza? Was it simply because it was available, or was it something you went after?
Well, I had a big break. I was married and I had a couple of kids and a mortgage and all those things, so I had to give it a break for quite some time. I went looking for another Datsun 1600 and they just weren't out there. They were too expensive.
Yeah.
And so I came across this car. And I'd actually seen it probably a year before, parked in a yard, in a sales yard, and I thought what a good car that would be to buy, but didn't buy it. And then a member of the MG Car Club had bought it, had prepared it for hill climb, and then I bought it off him at quite a reasonable price, and then I rally-fied it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about the Stanza. Okay. So my knowledge is somewhat limited. They originally 1600. Was that a deviation of the 1600 180B motor, or was it a clean sheet motor they put in these?
Oh, it was just the same old 1600.
Okay.
You know, it wasn't anything special. They had a 5-speed dogleg gearbox in it, which I really didn't like, because you know, every time you went to first, you actually put it in reverse.
That was a weird thing that came out with these things that everyone thought, that's weird.
Yeah,
and it never really took off.
And being a Triple S, it came with a rear sway bar,
right,
and red lights in the dash.
Yeah.
And that made them really quick.
Yeah.
Not really. So then we decided that the old 1600 was getting a bit ordinary.
Yeah.
As they do, and I went and was able to buy a Bluebird. A 2-litre Bluebird,
right.
Complete car. Which
That's pretty well a deviation of the 1600 motor, isn't it?
Again, L-series engine.
Yeah.
The L-series, the same as a 6-cylinder
L-series,
they just cut 2 cylinders off.
Yeah.
So I bought a Bluebird and I brought it back here and we pulled the motor and gearbox out of it and slotted holus bolus straight into the engine.
So they didn't have that funny pattern. They had
No, they had a straight up and down type gearbox.
Yeah.
And so that worked well. I then put a couple of 45mm Delortos on it, and running it sort of as it was. I was running in a lot of, and setting up with Arthur Evans, the Night Owl events that people would probably know. And Arthur and I competing in some events down south and that.
Yeah. Okay. So is it still that set up with it?
Well, the bottom half of the motor is. It's still the 2-litre, but it's got a very nice cylinder head on it, which has got big valves in it, nice porting job. Still running the 45s. I was lucky enough to come across it. We're at the Orange event, and this chap walked up to me at the end of the event and said, "Oh, do you know who owns the Stanza?" I said, "Oh, I do." And he said, "I've got some parts you might be interested in."
Right.
So I eventually bought two 260Z gearboxes off him.
Oh, really?
Which are better ratios than the standard Bluebird one.
Yeah.
And then from there, a year later, I came across a 4.8 diff to put in it. It's still an open diff, and chasing a H190 LSD for it.
So these were a live rear axle rather than a Datsun 1600.
Exactly, yeah. And we
with coil springs.
Coil springs. Yeah. And the diffs in them, the actual housing is not the Borg Warner one. It's the out of a Nissan Gazelle.
Right.
It's just a slightly wider track, and then I use the discs and calipers off an independent rear. Right. So I put 4-wheel discs on it.
Okay. Yep.
And the discs on the front are just the old Commodore calipers with Mitsubishi Verada discs on the front.
Right.
Very common thing that a lot of people are doing. It's probably still doing. Budget preparation.
So there's much machining and mucking around to do all that.
The machining for the discs is really nothing.
Yeah. And
it was just a matter of fabricating a bracket to hold the caliper in place.
Yeah.
Which is, what it is.
So these are like a trailing arm. suspension.
and bottom trailing arm.
So is that a coil over arrangement spring, or is it a
No.
spring on the trailing arm?
Yeah, spring on the trailing arm
And a shock absorber.
or on the diff housing, and
Yep.
then a shock absorber
Oh, okay.
mounted to that.
Yep.
And we just use Commodore rear shock absorbers and Commodore inserts in the front.
Right.
And just having had a revalve, just put them in.
Yep.
Works fine
What
for
they
me.
do.
I'm not
Yep.
that quick. Don't worry about it. Yeah.
Yep. So you've sort of rallified it from a hill climb car, so therefore you've had to do things like sump guards and
Yeah.
the roll cage though was
It had half a cage in it. I
Yep.
went and bought the front half of the cage and installed that.
right. Yep.
And then probably the biggest change I've made to this car for drivability was to put an electronic assist steering column in it.
Okay.
And a Suzuki Ingus.
Really?
Yeah, a lot of people are doing it. They do it. A lot of Escorts have got them and stuff. But most small Japanese cars have got a power assist. And I basically bought the column and put it on the bench, and took the column out of this and put it on the bench and went, okay, that's what I need to. I'll just do that.
Yep.
You know, it wasn't. A big
I've
job.
just bought a kit for my TR7 that's a bolt-on a kit arrangement.
Oh yeah, right.
But I haven't done it yet.
Oh, you'll love it.
Oh,
Absolutely love it. Yeah.
yeah. I don't know how I drove
And
that
of course,
car.
when you start winding caster on,
Yeah.
they start to get very heavy to
Right.
park.
Yeah.
I love it.
So have you got a caster adjuster?
All we've done is that we're using Commodore offset top mounts,
Right.
and I've modified or made new adjustable lower control arms
Right.
to go in it.
Yeah.
And I've used to get the caster working, because the standard caster are non-adjustable.
Yep.
So I went, and in this particular case, used I think LJ Tirana caster rods, which are quite beefy and strong, with a lot of adjustment on them, and just a matter of just drilling one hole, re-drilling one hole, and making them fit.
Right. Right. Now, from a driving standpoint, seeing you've rallied a few different sorts of cars, how's this car stand up as a fun car to drive?
Oh, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm pretty rusty, but we're doing okay. It's not as good as an Escort,
Right.
but I say to people, anyone can drive an Escort. Sorry, Escort owners. They're not as good, but this is a work in progress, and I think what I'm going to do over the break is two things: is build a newer motor for it, a little bit larger capacity with a little bit more compression, and put a 5-link rear end in it.
Yeah. I found a limited slip diff made a big difference.
Yeah, that's why
to drivability. It became a lot more predictable and controllable.
Yeah.
Having said that, you did have to adjust to it, because I found when I first did it, it was like understeer city. I was sort of not driving correctly. You had to drive it.
Yeah, you've got to flick it into the corner and make that work for you. You've got to be mindful of that.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't go to a welded diff.
No.
They're just too much. They're too much of a handful.
Yeah.
Especially on muddy downhill sections, they can become a bit ordinary.
And I think you need power as well,
Yeah.
because you need to be able to break the traction of the vac or whatever.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, it won't. Otherwise, you do understeer.
And really depends how far you wind your slippery up to how tight you make it. Like some cars might work better with a lighter poundage on the clutch plates in the diff. Yeah.
Now, how do you go with navigators? How do you form that connection with a navigator?
Interesting, Arthur was navigating for me in all the navigational trials, but he wanted to concentrate more on doing more of that. As far as setting, he's done a couple of the Tour of Tamworth, the Tour of the North, really great events. I had the pleasure of driving all those roads for him, but he didn't. I don't think he really wanted to move into forest type events.
Been there, done that, I think, with...
Arthur had been...
I know.
Yeah, he's been with everyone and really had some, had some great experiences. So, Facebook. I was on Facebook one night and an old mate had popped up I hadn't seen for 30 years, Chris Wheatley. And I said, how's it going? And he said, I wouldn't mind getting back into some motorsport. And I said, well, funny you should say that. I'm looking for a navigator. And Chris said, oh, right. I said, well, come around, have a look at the car. Let's have a chat. And he said, yeah, righto. And great. Yeah, just like we've been doing it for years.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Just one of those guys, yeah.
Yeah, old school friend. I've had several old school friends navigate for me, and it's also a certain nostalgia to it because I remember sitting at the start line at the Kempsey Coffs Harbour rally thing I did, and it was a nighttime thing, and I flicked them headlights up, and the officials doing the 5, 4, 3 thing. And I just looked over, and we're 21 again.
Yeah,
it was wonderful.
Well, that was the thing, Jim. When I first decided to go back into these events, and we did Bordeaux, I think was the first one we had a DNF. We did a head gasket, and I was worried that I'd be in the road.
Yeah, exactly.
You know.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying I'm a world beater, but
Yeah.
what I'm saying is that it sort of came back to me.
Yeah.
Muscle memory, if you like.
I know it's amazing. I hadn't done any motorsport for ages.
Yeah.
And I did that event to Coffs, and I can remember just Peter Brock style arm on the bloody armrest, and I was so much more relaxed with it all than I was back in the day.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
So, okay, you've owned all the cars, so therefore that tells me if someone come along with a bag full of money, would you say, oh yeah, I'll part with this with no worries, or does it have a certain sentimental attachment?
Oh, I wouldn't say sentimental.
Yeah.
But I've put a lot of time into it, and because I do all my own work, and all that's been my time.
Yeah.
And so it hasn't cost me a lot of money, but no, I don't think so. I think this will be it for me.
Yeah.
There's probably a couple more seasons left in me,
Yeah.
and in the car, and like I said, I'd like to do a bit more development.
Right.
There are some very nice, very quick stanzas around,
Yeah.
and it's the small things you make
Yeah.
the changes with.
Well, it's a whole lot of small things that add up
Yeah.
to a good thing.
Yeah, and I don't like making a huge amount of changes all in one go. I like to make one change at a time and see how we get on.
So do you have a bucket list? Is there an event like the Alpine or something that you just sort of think, one day, is there one of those?
Tour of Ireland.
Tour of Ireland. That'd be bitumen. They'll keep
That's
on
okay. Yeah, look, I'm happy as long as I can break traction with the rear and get it sideways. I think I'd have to do that in an Escort.
Yeah.
I think this would be probably a little bit. But no, Tour of Ireland in Australia. I'll just take it as it comes.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Just sort of. Yeah, get on with it.
Yeah. I've got a bucket list of racetracks I want to drive on, but the odds are it won't happen.
Yeah.
And big rallies are way out of the league these days.
Yeah. Well, the cost too. It's not cheap.
No, it's not
entry
cheap.
fees and tyres and everything's just
everything.
Back when we were into it, in the 70s, you could go to an event for $60 for your entry fee, and you'd use, I don't know. I was always using second-hand tyres off people.
Oh yeah, everything was second-hand. Wrecking yards were great friends. And, and when you're young, you have a certain blasé-ness to things. And you drive, like in my case, I drive from Grafton to Kempsey, do a rally and drive home again. Mm-hmm. No trailer, no backup, no service crew, just me and the navigator. Where now I probably wouldn't do that. I would want some mates along just in case.
Yeah, we're very fortunate that there's a lot of people. We trailer now. The car, the car with the 4.8, it's not really suitable for driving on a long distance, so we trailer it. And but there's always a lot of people around and willing to help out, and that's a good thing about the camaraderie of
rallying. So you'll be doing it for a few more years.
I hope so. As long as the finances can and my wife lets me.
Well, thanks very much for talking about this wonderful old Datsun.
mate.
Thanks, Dad. I'm Quack McMullard. Bye for now.